You guys asked for it, and I'm here to deliver. So, last weekend we had the Winter Championship Finals for the JP server of Zero, and there were some pretty interesting results, but unfortunately we didn't really have that kind of like super spicy like Neo Nectar or like Blouse or Spike Brothers or like that kind of thing. I ended up winning. There were some spicy decks in the top 16, but unfortunately the remainder of the competition, top 4 and onwards wasn't exactly the craziest, but I asked you guys on Twitch, and quite a few people requested me to go over the top 16 decks of all the players that qualified to day 2, so that for those of you guys that are playing globally, you know what kind of decks to look forward to in set 5. I'm still going to be doing a tier list as usual in a couple days, but I wanted to first go over this actual top 16 lineup of all the players and the 3 decks that each of them brought, and then we still have some decks to go over with the deck and fights, and then of course we're going to have the tier list and set analysis as usual. So without any further ado, let's get into it and talk about the actual players. So as you can see here, this is what the top 16 looked like. So when you look at the top 16, the winners were Haru, then Pikachu, who beat Nazna, Aren beat Nakano, both really big players that it's pretty surprising, you'd expect this to be the finals of anything. Then Konmai beat Bosuo. I think a lot of people watch Bosuo, so that was a bit unfortunate. And then Silk beat Taiyaki. Silk is the person that's been writing a lot of the articles, kind of like ranting about the issues with Zero lately. And then Yomo beat Sanctuary Guard, so this was also in the top 16. And then Yomo went pretty far, actually, all the way until the top 4 here. And then Satoshi played against Onigiri, and Onigiri won. And then Saifu played against Keto, and you can see that Keto was the champion at the end of it. So the finals being against Konmai, who beat Bosuo. So he had kind of like the winner's path there, all the way to 2nd place. So let's take a look at their decks listed in order of the website and go over it, right? So first things first, we have Haru, who brought Angels, Bermuda, as well as Aquaforce. So this lineup you'll probably get used to seeing. Angels, I just did a deck and fight on yesterday, are a pretty popular deck. As you can see, the ratios can definitely differ. Some people play Gabriel as a backup, some people play a stand trigger. Then the G-Zone, some people go harder on the Mikael lineup, and some people still play like Blitzas and stuff for the Gabriel GB2 if they go into it, and then just play 2 Raphaels. And then you can see here as well, like Danielle counts usually are between 2 and 3. There's a no seal in here, only 1 of the Hells, which I personally play more of, and then 3 split of the no seals and the ponies. For the Bermuda, it's actually quite a big surprise. So we start off with Nemuel, and you might be thinking, oh my god, these are all going to be Nemuel. You'll be surprised, right? I think everyone's used to Nemuel. The strongest addition to it is of course the new Stride for duos, which lets you bounce a PGs. So even if you don't have Rowan or you don't have Nemuel, you can still clone your PGs. And then of course Tabas is really strong. The changes in Tabas going into set 5 are of course the addition of 2 Commander Tabas. Many lists played 4 Lambros as well, but I'm assuming that unfortunately Haru probably doesn't have them. And then the grade 2s, the Adelaide has been put in as a 4 of because it works really nicely with Commander Tabas, of course, and in general just functions really nicely with a deck. Like if you like, it's an on place ability, so you can also kind of function when called mid battle by something like High Tide, if I'm not mistaken. So that was Haru. Haru was the first player we looked at. Then Silk had some interesting decks as well, running Bermuda, Grand Blue, as well as Angels. So his Angels list was really spicy. First things first, his Bermuda list was Mir. So Mir was really common. Mir Break Ride plus this Legion, the other duo Legion, is the most common deck actually, I think, for the Bermuda lists. And so this was very popular, where Nemuel has this kind of issue where her damage output isn't that crazy, and she kind of gets restricted by just swinging and relying on Spikas if they play them for the multi-attack, but otherwise you just pressure with the crit. Whereas the Break Ride Mir build, not necessarily running the new Mir, but just running the Break Ride with the Legion, is really strong because you can still do 5 attacks pretty easily, and even more with Spika, so that's also very good. This Night Rose list is pretty common. Usually people play 4 Night Roses if they have them, but we can see this list and decided to run a full draw lineup. Many people play some crits or stands, and then for the grade 1s, the one of Tech here is the guy that gains more power, I think, when he boosts or when he's called from grave. And then the grade 2 lineup is also very interesting. Many people run 4 Lazy because it's an easy way to fetch stuff out of drop zone. Cannoneer is usually at 2, the Rook usually at 2 or 3, and then this zombie is also played usually as like a 1 or 2, maybe max 3. And King Serpent is also being played, even though at first I played it and then I wasn't sure if I want to keep it because of the low power, but we can see the King Serpent is very common because he instantly refunds your lazies right off the bat. So that's also very cool because you can just do more during your turn before going into battle phase. And this Celestial list is also very unique in running stands and the Celestial Break Ride, which is also pretty surprising. Also runs a Sariel, the split between no seals and the the grade 1 no seal counterpart for Celestials. Pretty interesting, going pretty ham on the Mikaels here as well. So very cool lineup by Silk. You can see all the achievements that Silk has. He was third in the Spring Championship as well. So just amazing, just amazing player. Did super good. Saifu had a similar lineup as well. Basically here we see again the Break Ride Mirror deck, then we see the Night Rose list here running 4 Night Roses. So this is something like very similar to my own lineup in terms of the G zone. And of course here we see 2 King Serpents, 1 Columbard. I'm always surprised by lists that don't run Columbard because I think it's a really good extender. So like 2 or even 3 honestly, but I think like 2 is perfectly fine to run. You can technically get away with 1 and you fetch it out with your big Obadiah, but technically like you want to be safe and not damage check it, so I usually prefer to run 2 of things that I'm fine with being as 1-ofs. And then this Celestial list again is different. We can see only 2 Danielles, full on 5 damage swappers that give you a counter charge, and then 1 of the Refros as the 9th card in that slot. Konmine, who did very good, came second, had a lineup such as this, which was Silverthorn. So Silverthorns are really good right now in JP Zero because essentially like he ran one of the Break Ride, which is very surprising, with only 3 heal guards, which I don't personally agree with, but essentially like Silverthorns have a really good going first game plan because they just have super aggressive combo, and otherwise their G-Zone is quite good, right? The Lunatic Dragon now works very generically. The Harry Stride is also quite generic. This is also generic, you know, just with Magia. This fixes if you brick, and this is also generic Stride. So the G-Zone for Pale Moon is actually really good, and overall you're just in a pretty good spot running this kind of lineup. I don't know if you really need 2 Harrys, to be honest. You can definitely make another space for I guess you could make space for a Messiah Stride, but technically you don't really need it because your stuff usually goes back to Soul at the end of turn anyway if you want to play that kind of matchup. So Silverthorns are definitely a deck that are going to be super popular going forward because they just, you know, Pale Moon got support, aka Silverthorn got support, right? Then Tabas, this list is very similar. 4 Basil, 4 of the Algos, 1 High Tide, 4 Adelaides is like a very common lineup. This grade 3 lineup is also like very common. Honestly speaking, like the only change I would make to this deck myself is +1 of this grade 1 and just keep this, the Power Giver, at 1 in my opinion. And then of course, once again, this is a Celestial list that looks very similar to the last one, so perhaps they were teammates or they worked together for this event. Then we have Nakano. Nakano sadly knocked out very early, but a very good player. You can see the achievements here. Was the only person bringing Revengers. So Revengers definitely have fallen off. I think they've fallen off over time, and I think that their time in the spotlight is finally coming to an end. They're going down to tier 2. Oh my god, what a disaster. And then for Night Rose here, we can see again another 9 draw lineup. So you see 4 of the Night Storm because he is just really strong when your opponent's at like 3 in giving you the nice extension for little input. And then on top of that, you also have 1 of this dragon that like mills and gets power, but you rarely use that effect, to be honest. But the main deck is pretty similar most times, like 4 Lazies, 2 Cannoneer, 2 of the Zombie, 3 Rook, and 2 King Serpent, maybe 1 copy or 2 copies of Columbard. And the big surprise here, of course, is Link Joker. So this is the Link Joker variant that basically focuses more on the combo build of Messiah. So you run the Fighter Selection Double Rare Stride that gives you all the power to your front row for every lock card on the field, and then you basically abuse the Awakening Messiah together with this guy and the Blast Monk that basically keep relocking or like unlocking your Awakens to keep restanding and attacking for big power. So you can definitely do some nasty stuff with it. Go like 1 to 6. It's pretty strong. So Nakano believed in it, but sadly things didn't go that well. He wasn't the only person bringing Messiahs though. So Satoshi here coming in actually had a very unique lineup that we didn't see much in this tournament, which was Vanquisher, which people thought would be really good in this tournament because it's like, hey, you can get rid of Grand Blue, you can counter the Legion decks and all that kind of stuff in theory, but when you're playing in a 3-deck 1 ban format, people can just ban the Vanquisher and just happily play against Gears and Blademaster, right? Blademaster, the list is also quite interesting, choosing to run 3 Base Overlord and 2 the Greats. So in this meta, if you don't have a bunch of legions that you can keep recycling, you might be in a bit of a trouble simply because you need to keep relegioning sometimes in the late game to not deck out. So that's a pretty brave decision, but overall the G-Zone does look pretty good as well. And then of course for Gears, we've been seeing Gears now cutting the upstream. So in the last set's meta, upstream was really important, but that was because Messiah was everywhere, Vanquisher was everywhere, Blademaster was everywhere. Like those kind of decks that really pop your front row or lock your front row were really popular, so you played a lot of upstreams. But now Now in this meta, it's all about Granblue, it's all about Angels, right? It's all about Bermuda. Those decks don't really play much control, they're aggressive. And as a result, people cut upstream because upstream now doesn't really have a purpose. So keep that in mind when you're building this deck in set 5 to adjust it for the meta. When control is heavy, upstream goes back. If control isn't there, upstream is not necessary. So that's kind of how this list looks, and I do agree with it. I think Satoshi has a good list for gears here as well. Sanctuary Guard actually did not play Sanctuary Guard, even though he has the icon here and everything. He's also a TCG player, so very nice. Topped in 2016, and so you can see he runs Night Rose. So again, very similar build as usual in terms of the ratios and everything. Like we've seen this list before. For Angels, this is a Gavriel build, so this one is actually not Celestials. This is more Gavriel centered with a Celestial package in it. So basically choosing to actually focus more on the Gavriel and the Legion that calls something out of damage. And of course, his last deck in the lineup was of course the Mirror together with the Legion, so the one that we talked about at the start of the video. So pretty good lineup. Like this is kind of like tried and tested 3 of. It's like Bermuda, Granblue, and Angels are gonna do you well, which is quite a different meta. Like it's decks that 2 decks that can really stall and play the long game while still having an immense aggression, especially Angels, and then a super aggressive deck in Granblue. Like this deck is the true aggro right now of this meta. So then Pikachu had some interesting decks as well. So he actually ran Gavriel as well. So again, another Gavriel player with the 1 pony. I think he was the person that called the pony to front row and then lost to the self damage, if I'm not mistaken, in top 4 or top 8. I can't remember. And then this was another Mirror Break Right Legion list without the Nemules. So again, we've only seen like 1 Nemule so far, I think. And then finally, again, Night Rose with a 9 draw. So 9 draws are pretty common, running also the 1 Column Bard, which I agree with. I think it is a nice lineup. Nazna here, let's take a look at what he played. So Nazna also was quite different, running with Asha. So Asha, how did Nazna actually do? I need to check over here. So Nazna sadly lost to Pikachu there in the top 16, but this is a version of Asha that I haven't looked at too much. Only 2 of the Asha strides, which is quite interesting because I think you generally speaking want 4 because the back row attack is your main form of aggression, but he's also playing a lot of defensive pieces, right? We have the defensive grade 2 that gains 5k in your opponent's turn, and we have this grade 2 that draws so many cards, so you actually have like more defense in general, and also running the Maiden Legion, which I personally am not sure if I like the Maiden Legion. I guess in this meta it's kind of necessary, but like this deck already puts back a lot of stuff from drop zone in the first place, so you don't really risk decking out that much because of like Pias and like the this stride and things, stuff like that. So I don't really feel like you really risk decking out as much in this deck, but maybe I'm wrong, and I feel like the grade 3 with resist is probably a bit stronger, especially against matchups like Messiah, which of course weren't popular here, but still, I feel like it's a worthy pickup. Then of course this is our second Nemuel, so Nemuel still, still very good, still kicking there, but definitely a different kind of list now. And then of course Gavriel, a third Gavriel, so you can see that Gavriel definitely was underestimated last set, and now that a lot of the control faded away, it's looking pretty good, as it also adds aggression to the Celestials list on top of that. So Yomo did quite well, also running the Silverthorns, Celestials 2 of course, with the 1 stand trigger Gavriel, and then of course this was very different Night Rose list, Night Rose with the Legions, so we don't see that very often, and triple Column Bard and the 1 of Chappie. So the list is actually quite different from usual with 3 stands, and of course we have the Silverthorns. This one is quite the tried and tested, triple Lunatech, and then a bunch of 1 ofs and a 2 of Lukier. Triple Lunatech I think is also fine, but 2 of is definitely enough. That's not a super crazy stride that I don't think you should be going crazy for. And this is a person that only got like the first place in Clan All-Stars with Angel Feather back then, so not a player with like crazy achievements, but definitely made a name for himself in this event. Then we have Onigiri, who played also Gear Chronicle with a very different lineup. Again, no upstreams here, you can see people adapted to the meta. We see another Nemuel here and Altmile, so this was Dual Knight Altmile, but quite different because he was running, so Ganslots I definitely agree on. Ganslots are 100% the move, like they are the best backup grade 3 for Altmile, but the 1 of Legion is cool, but you're missing Knight of Twin Sword, which for me is a little bit like odd, because I feel like Knight of Twin Sword gives you a lot of the kind of like extension that you don't have otherwise, and like the Sword Me has like, it has cold targets in the deck, but I don't know, I feel like there's definitely other ways to like approach this deck list in my opinion. So it's still quite good. And I think having an old Mal representation is also very, very nice. So Onigiri, how far did he go? He actually won his top 16 and lost to Keto in the top 8, which of course was who was the champion after that. Everyone's favorite Aren. So Aren had a good lineup as well with his wall of achievements. Look at this man, dude, it's insane. Like top 8, top 16, like winner, top 8, like oh my god. So then here we see the Tabas, another tried and tested. He runs a pretty interesting lineup though. One of Magnum, one of the Saberflow, I think she was called, and then like no Adelaides, triple Basil only with 4 Diamantes, and then 1 10k attacker here as well. So definitely a pretty different list for Tabas, but nevertheless very interesting. His Celestials list also ran 1 Ramiel Reverse, which is interesting tech. I'm not sure where that would actually come up, because you really, I don't know, like, you value your board in this meta a lot, and I feel like it's locking like that isn't really gonna, like, I don't know, maybe I'm just not seeing something, but it's an interesting tech. I would love some breakdown on it though. And then Nemuel was his 3rd pick, which again is a tried and tested choice here. Boswo sadly didn't make it past top 16, but he also had a tried and tested lineup of the Thavas with a double Adelaide here and 3 Tidal Assaults, which is quite different from what we're used to. And his Night Rose list also ran a 3-2 split on the grade 3s, which I think is fine, but 3 Colombard, which I think is also quite good. Colombard is a very strong and powerful attacker. I think you can definitely reduce it to maybe like 2, and then run another rookie, another rook rather, just to have that, you know, making sure you don't, like, you know, it doesn't go to damage and stuff like that. You have those 2 attackers to always recycle with. And then Nemuel was his 3rd pick here, no break rides in sight. And then Keto, who was the winner of the whole event, had a also tried and tested lineup with another Night Rose list with 2 Columbards this time, and the 3-2 lineup on the grade 3s. So that was kind of like the main spice there, not running any of the zombie. And then here the Celestial list is running one of the stand, and then the Tabas list is very interesting, splitting the heal guards and the max, which is not very common to see, and running a Benedict too, which is quite cool. Also running the one of Adelaide with the Saberflow. This is very similar to Aren's list, and I think they might be teammates, I can't remember, but definitely some similar ideas, but also some very surprising ones in here. But he won the whole event, right? Then we had Taiyaki. Taiyaki ran though he was a 2nd Link Joker player. So again, we see Night Rose here with the 9 draws as usual. Then we have the Ramiel Reverse included Celestials that we saw earlier too, and then the Messiah. So again, this one is actually not the combo version, I think, or like it's not even running Exilix, because there's only 3 Awakenings, so I think it's not leaning into the combo as hard. But you know, it's just running less of the combo pieces, which I guess is telling me it's not the combo variant of the deck. But still, Taiyaki had a good showing. And finally, unfortunately, I don't know how to read these first 2 kanji, and this is Moon, was the final player here, who had some tops beforehand as well, but his list lineup was the Gear Chronicle with Upstream. So it's an interesting list. There's definitely a lot of tech choices here, which of course you can search out with the Upstream, so I think that was the kind of idea there. Running some crits too, the 2 crits, the game with special. Then this was a Night Rose list that only ran 6 draws and 3 crits. I've been testing crits in Night Rose myself as well, but I'm not the biggest fan of it. So I think 9 draws is probably the move, because of, you know, just finding your pieces on time, and then, you know, you do risk decking out as a result, of course, but the aggression definitely works. And finally, Nemuel was the final list. So yeah, there you go, guys. That is the top 16, all of the decks of the Zero Winter Championship Finals, and I think it was pretty exciting and pretty cool to take a look at the decks. If you want to see some gameplay yourself, we have the VOD from top 4 onwards on my YouTube as well. Leave a link in the description so you guys can check that out. But it was a pretty exciting time, and me and Kai had a good time commentating as well. Speaking of which, there's also the winter circuit for global happening right now, so that's going to be very cool to take a look at. But yeah, so that's it, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you got something out of looking at all these deck lists. If you liked the video, please do give it a like, and if you haven't already, please do subscribe, because we're getting closer and closer to 50k and I need your guys' support. But otherwise, that's going to be it for me today, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.